Hey everybody, it's Anna J. Walner and welcome to the Author Library. And today I am pleased to have with me author Marie Powell. Marie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure, Anna. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm an author of fantasy mostly and speculative fiction. And I also have written 40 children's books that have been published by, traditional publishers like Amicus and Scholastic Education, that type of thing. And this is what I'm doing this year. And the reason I'm here is that I've just published a young adult novel series, Last of the Gifted. And so I'm anxious to talk about it, and I'm really happy to be here. So thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you so much for coming on here to chat with me. As Marie said, she is the young adult historical fantasy author of the Last of the Gifted series. And can I just say that the covers are gorgeous?
Yes, you may. I'm really, really proud of them. Like, my publisher is a small publisher from Mossbank, Saskatchewan, and I live in Regina, Saskatchewan, which is Treaty 4 territory here. And so we were able to reach out to a very, very talented young man in the United Kingdom, Callum Jagger. And I'm just so pleased with what he's done with the concepts of the book. Like, it's, as you said, it's historical fantasy. It's actually medieval fantasy, so a little different. It's set in 13th century Wales, and it's about, well, I'll tell you a little bit about it and how the covers came about. So it's about two siblings who pledge their magical abilities to protect their people from the invading English army in 13th century Wales. And they get a little help from the last true Prince of Wales after his murder. So my character, like the character of Llewellyn the Last, who is the last true Prince of Wales, considered to be, is basically a Welsh lord, and this comes from like a sigil, I guess, a symbol of the various people that they used to wear on their costumes and in their flags and so on. And this one comes from Gwynedd, which is the province that this takes place in, the location in Wales, where he was sort of reduced to ruling just that one area, and then the English invaded and took that as well. And that pretty much ended the independence of Wales. And so when we were looking at what to do, it's called Spirit Sight, and my characters are gifted. They have fantasy gifts. So Hugh is a warrior in training, and he's also got a special ability to bond with and control the minds of animals and birds. And when the prince is murdered, brutally murdered, Hugh sees it, and Hugh's spirit melds with the prince's. And at that point, he gets the prince inside his own head. The soul of the prince, if you will, is living on inside his head, and he gets help or guidance in how to survive this war and how to try and help his people survive, the invasion as they lose and get backed up into a final corner. And yeah, so the idea of sight, so we wanted something that was like an eye, kind of reminiscent of an eye, right? But at the
Right.
same time that would have some symbols of Wales. And this is the symbol of Gwynedd. So our designer kind of, and these are Celtic knots, right? So he kind of melded it all together and created these beautiful symbols. So this is the one for Spirit Sight. And then Water Sight, which is book 2 of the series, carries on with his sister. And she has developed the ability, she can see the future in a drop of water. I mean, she's got that gift of second sight, but she also develops the ability to throw knives. They're trying to teach each other how to protect themselves, like how to fight back, so to speak, right? And so she goes beyond beyond what's allowed for a lady, or a traditional woman in that day. And so she develops the ability to throw these knives. Yeah. And her boyfriend, her betrothed, like the guy she's supposed to marry, has these 3 knives created for her. And they have the same colored stone as her eye. He matches it to her eyes, right? So, I mean, just a kind of romantic gesture. And so that's what her eye is green, right? His eyes are blue-gray. And so that's the color scheme that he used. And also just the fact that Callum was able to use the mountains at the bottom here, if you can see them. These are the mountains that are kind of behind me This is Caderidris, which is one of the famous mountains of Wales that has magical properties to it, I guess you could say. And it's also the castle, if this is the ruin of the castle, that my character in fantasy, total fantasy, not in real life, but in total fantasy, would have been the lady of, had she married the fellow she was in, who created the knives for her. So yeah, the story of the book is all wrapped up in the covers, and he did such a good job, you know, just with what we gave him, not having read the books, because he created the covers prior to the books even being published, right? So
Right.
yeah, I was really, really pleased with what he did and how well he understood what we were trying to do.
Well, they are absolutely gorgeous, and a strong female lead. I really do appreciate that, especially in a historical setting, because, you know, as we know, that wasn't always the case.
Yeah. This, you know, that's one thing, like right now, you know, maybe we understand how things can go more than we did when I first started writing this book too. Like they're in a period of transition, like huge transition. Their whole world changes, right? In the space of about a year and a half. And there are poems from that time period that I kind of used, you know, in the research. I was thinking about it, and like they talk about the stars falling from the sky, and you know what is underneath comes up, and what is up, you know, like the people who were considered to be noblemen are suddenly paupers, and the people who were servants are suddenly, you know, raised to positions of power because they betrayed them, you know. And like it was like it's just a horrific change, and going from a very rural lifestyle really to the English, you know, at that time had cities and whatnot, walled cities and this and that, and all of that came in upon the Welsh because they were used to a much more open lifestyle, you know, rural. And they had a prince, but he kind of, the word prince in Welsh doesn't mean royal, it means principal citizen. So he was like the best guy, you know, again, the one who's supposed to look after them and so on. And he was very itinerant. He would move from, he had 22 possible places where he could go. They called them llys, which means a royal court, I guess you could say. But these would be really tiny from our perspective. It would be like some small town out in the country somewhere, you know, and he'd move from one to the other, and they would, you know, put him up, and he probably took taxes off of them or cattle or something, but you know, and then he would move on. And all of that was destroyed. Like they literally, even now, they can only find one of the 22 llys. They're gone. And you know, the castle Garth Kellen, where he was, which I put in my book, is no more. Nobody can really figure out where it was. It's completely, it could be here, it could be there, you know, there's, but there really isn't. Like they did a very good job of erasing their entire way of life, right? And deliberately, you know, it was an intentional thing. And so now we've been through something now in this last couple of years with COVID, where everything has changed for us, you know? And so it's been kind of interesting writing these books in this time period and bringing them out, because I've obviously been writing them for a long time, but bringing them out now and infusing that into the rewriting and the, you know, preparing to publish them, because I have a real perspective on that now that I didn't have before, just in terms of what happens to you when the world changes. So then I was able to give Kat that in her book, Katrin, my female character. I was able to give her an extreme response to change, you know, a chance to really grow. And you know, it worked out, I guess you could say.
And the amount of research historically that you sound like you've done for the book lends an element of intelligence to the writing and to the storyline itself, because it is based on actual history, which I think is great.
Yeah, thank you. Because I mean, it's different, right? Fantasy writers, we can write about fantasy worlds, you know, completely invented worlds, right? But the more I found out about this, the more I knew I wanted to set this with these characters who had these abilities, but you know, because they're legendary abilities, and I wanted to use that, ones that would be real in the stories of that time period, right? Something that might be believable to them in a way, and at the same time use the real life that they were trying to live through. Because I felt like we didn't, well, for me, I didn't know much about it, and my background is Welsh. My grandfather was Welsh, right? So that was why I started looking into all of this. And I actually went, so you know, I did the usual, I was going to be a travel writer, right? And that's like, I'm a journalist by nature, or by former profession, I guess you could say. I'm a journalist. So I was thinking about doing this as travel writing, and I planned a trip to Wales, and we went to see these castles and blah, blah, and then I went into one that was a castle of the Welsh princes. And I didn't even know there was such a thing. I was like, castle's a castle, right? Whatever. Big people with lots of money owned them, right? That's all I knew about them, really, other than the fact that I'd read a few, read some books and whatnot. And when I walked into this one, and it was so different from the big English castles. And there was kind of historical placards that you could go around. It was very self-guided. There wasn't anybody around but us, so there wasn't any cute little shops or all the things you find in the castles, the bigger ones, there wasn't any of that. And so we wandered around pretty much at will and read these placards with the histories on them, and just being struck by, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, isn't that interesting? And I just had to use more. I had to find out more, and I had to use what I could find out. And everything I found out was weird and interesting and something I could play with, right?
Which is a great thing that we're able to do as authors, is take something that seems, normal or not so normal or whatever, and then take our own completely different spin on it if it is normal, and then if it's something truly unique like what you found, then take it to the next level. So that had to have been amazing. Now, the first book in the series, Spirit Sight, which begins the series, this novel has won multiple awards. Both of them have, actually.
Well, yeah, Spirit Sight won Moonbeam Bronze Medal for young adult fiction. So I was really happy to get that, because that's kind of nice recognition. And they've both been doing quite well in terms of best-selling status. Like Spirit Sight's been a bestseller in Arthurian fantasy, which I love, because I mean, there's some references to Arthur in it. Like we have Arthur's crown. That's one of the Welsh relics, actually, that really did exist. Or I mean, well,
Right.
it's written about. We can hope it existed, right. Can prove it, but so it was really nice to hit the sort of top bestseller status in that, and get the little flag. And I did put Watersight into a cover contest, and it got in the top 15 of like 384 covers. So I was really pleased to see that, because yeah, that's good recognition for it. Yeah. So
now,
so far so good.
Is this a duology, or will there be more in the series?
Well, I got to the end of it, and I still wanted to write about this time period and these characters. But I think, like talking about it with my writer friends and people, here and there in the past 6 months as I've been working on the next book in this. And I think I'm going to do it as a duology, like have it be the two books. And because they have a nice arc, they go somewhere, and they sort of feel to people reading them. I understand from people reading them, giving me feedback, that they do have a kind of a feeling of closure between the two of them. So I would like to not disturb that. I don't believe in sequels just for the sake of sequels, right? That can ruin something. But I do still want to write about the characters. So I think what I'm going to do is bring out a kind of a spin-off series, and deal with some of the aftermath of this, huge catastrophic event that happened to them. Because I want to do that. Now that we're coming to the end of COVID, I'm kind of, I would really like to imagine, I guess, write and imagine how you get through something. What do you do on the other end of this? Like, how is the world going to look next? Now that we've been through this, and we know it's changed everything, we know it's going to change everything. We're not going to go back to the normal we had in like 2019 or something, like, so, and that same would be for them. Like in 1281, they would have had a certain way, they had a princess, everything was great, they were, managing quite well. And then in 1282, and she died, and they went to war, and they lost everything. And by the October of 1283, it was completely different. So very similar time period, and I can't resist it. You know, I want to play with that and find out how they lived through it. And as I write them through it, maybe I'll come up with some ideas for me too. That's my hope anyway.
It is so hard to write a series and then become attached to the characters and let them go. So
Yeah,
knowing that you really wrapped it up within the 2 books and having the knowledge to step away, wow, that's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, it is. And I still think there's a story here that isn't finished, you know, like there's still some loose ends and things that I really want to deal with. I want to finish. I want to pull forward, you know,
Right.
but I can see them as not events that relate to the invasion, which the 2 books kind of tell, but events that relate to how they got through it and what they did next. And that's kind of what I want to do with the next books that I think it's 3 books. You know, I want to tell how they got, like, how did that all come out in the end, and how did they get going again? You know, because the fascinating thing about the Welsh is that even though they lost everything and, you know, just became a part of England, you know, completely lost their independence and their language, their ability to use, or at least legally use their language without getting some kind of punishment for it. And then in the 1990s, they got the right to use their language again, and boom, it came right back. The way that they spoke it in the 1200s, apparently, you know, like, so it hadn't changed. And they'd kept it alive in, I don't know, little huts in the mountains or something. I don't know how they kept it alive, because still, you know, about 16% of the people spoke it, and now about 20% of the people speak it. And now to live in Wales, your kids would be going to school in Welsh. You would be working, you'd have to be able to speak Welsh to get a job, and so on and so forth, right? So, and there's Welsh all over the place. There's Welsh in the signs, the signs in the highways even, you know, like the big words are Welsh and the little words are English. So you would have to learn it, you know, or at least learn enough of it to get by in order to live there today. So how, you know, obviously they had something happened, you know what I mean? They were able to keep some kind of integrity, some kind of customs, some of their customs, and some of their, what made them unique as a Celtic people. You know, they were able to keep a hold of some of that because they still have it 800 years later. They were able to bring it back again, right? So that's fascinating too. And that's why I want to write the next series, right? So.
Absolutely. Well, I just have to ask, when, you know, when did you realize that you had a passion for writing? I mean, you said that you have written 40 children's books, and you mentioned being a travel journalist. I mean, is writing fantasy where your heart is?
Yeah, it always has been, you know, like, I tell you, the first book I ever wrote was, I was 6 years old, and I was being babysat by a neighbor, and I wrote a book. It was like emergent writing, I'm telling you, and lots of very bad stick pictures, you know, and we stapled it together, and she let me read it to her, and it was, you know, I mean, it's like, I still remember that. Now she's long gone, but thank you, Eva. Anyway, you know, but these things, like, I've been basically writing, you know, since I was able to write, and maybe beyond, maybe before that even, right? But when I was a teenager, what I wanted to write was fantasy, you know, and I was lucky. I had very supportive teachers, you know, that found me ways to get writing workshops and things like that existed back then. And I guess because I'm a scholarship student type, you know, like, I have a lot of I have 5 university degrees, but I got them pretty much, yeah, pretty much all on scholarship. Like, I'm basic middle class, you know, lower middle class family. Like, nobody in my family has a university degree but me. In my first family anyway. Some of the nieces and nephews do, but you know, and my daughter does, but basically it was just kind of not, you should work, right, for a living. That's what I was raised to believe. And so becoming a journalist was writing for work, you know, and a way to write and at the same time have a job, right? And so that's how it became. And I began to freelance after I had my kids, because being a newspaper reporter is not, I don't, people do it and have families now, and that's great. But, you know, when I was doing it, it was kind of like, you were expected to be there, you know,
Right.
and all that. And I felt like I should raise my kids instead. So basically I went freelance at that point and started getting back to writing, you know, like writing short stories and things like that, taking workshops and doing, you know, what I could to become a different kind of writer. And yeah, and so I got this idea for this book, and then I went back and got my MFA in creative writing from UBC to write these books. You know, really, it was like I had this idea. I knew I wasn't good enough. You know, I wasn't a good enough writer at the time to be able to really pull this off the way I wanted to. I wanted it to be, you know, it's my heart project, right? I wanted it to be really, really strong. And so I went back and got my final degree with this as my thesis project, and still continued. You know, I was like, yeah, I just, I believe in just following what you really are passionate about, you know, and like there's so many different types of writing. I can't imagine not doing something, like saying no to something. I'd like to write everything. I'd like to write everything, you know, but basically my heart's with fantasy. Yeah, I think speculative fiction anyway, suspense, fantasy, that type of thing.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, as a seasoned literary creator across the board, do you have any valuable advice that you would like to pass along? Something that you wish you knew in the very beginning of your journey?
Sure. Yeah. I would say really, really, really don't take it personally. You know, like whatever, just take whatever feedback you can get, and remember that, you know, people have their own personal tastes, right? Just because they don't like what you're doing doesn't mean it isn't good, or just because they criticize it doesn't mean it isn't good. Sometimes people will give you a critique, and if you can get past the hurt, you know, and like it hurts, you know, to especially my very first short story, one of the very first short stories that I wrote, and the very first one I had published, sat in a box in my basement for 10 years. Because at a workshop, somebody said, well, this isn't really a short story, it's a character sketch, you know? And I went, oh, and like 9 other people gave me feedback and said, you know, this is good, you should do this, you should do this, right? But one person said something that was kind of like, this is not a short story. And that was the voice that I heard, right?
Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't let people convince you of what you're doing. You know what you're doing in your heart. You just have to get the skill to make it happen, you know? And that's why feedback is useful. But people don't know what it is you're trying to write. If you're writing something that's a little bit different, it's going to get critique. It's going to get that sort of vaguely negative, I don't know what this is, don't like it, whatever feedback, but just push through it, you know, like learn what you can, push through it, keep improving your craft, and eventually you'll be able to tell it so that they can't say no, you know. But you really have to believe in yourself in this business, because it is not easy, you know. It's fun and it's great, and you can't stop doing it. If you write, you write, right? That's what you are. But it's not easy to get the publication. It's not easy to get stuff out there and be in this very competitive world we have right now of, you know, so many books that people could read, right? You really have to know what you are doing and who you're doing it for. If you can find people that are responding to you, that's where you want to go. But that's what I would say. Just believe in, you know, just do it anyway, right? Don't stop. Don't get derailed. Just keep going, and eventually it will work out.
And you made a really great point earlier. You know, we all have different tastes. I'm not a big lover of political thrillers, but a lot of people are.
Exactly.
Legal thrillers, you know, John Grisham makes a lot of money. A lot of people love his books, but they're just not for me. And in the same way that we all have different tastes in music and men and fashion and cars, you will have different takes and different likes on a book that you read. But if it doesn't particularly resonate with you, I don't encourage negative, hurtful reviews. Maybe say this book was not for me, but people who enjoyed this book or this book would like the book. So there's a way to say it wasn't for me, but it is for someone else because it is good.
That's correct. Yeah, you can give good feedback, you know, even if you didn't like the piece that you're reading or whatever, you know. And at the same time, like you say, we should just recognize that you know, negative
Right.
feedback is hurtful, but at the same time it can be useful, you know. So yeah,
It can be.
yeah, you have to push through.
I always tell people, you know, I did a little series on this, and you know, think of your review. Thank you, number one, readers, for leaving a review.
Yes.
Number two, think of it like an employee review, that you're critiquing the positives and the negatives that the author has in the book. And quite honestly, I have seen some reviews that point out things that I would say as an author, if I got a review like that, I would say, I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
I will. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yep.
I will make a note to incorporate that moving forward.
Moving forward. That's exactly right. You know, take what you can out of it and move forward, and, you know, just keep moving forward. And that's the other thing too. You can read a book by an author and not like it, and then you can read another book by that author and love it. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's partly, I don't know. It's just, you just have to find your comfort level, right? Yeah.
It is so subjective.
Yeah.
And so I do not, I mean, yes, of course, I read the comments. And yes, if one is particularly barbed and hurtful, it may get to me, but at the end of the day, I know that there are books out there that I've absolutely hated. And so readers have every right to
Love them.
yeah,
You might hate it, somebody else might love it. It's like we all have taste, right?
and
Yeah.
and the best books out there, the best books, even classics and best-selling authors, you know, USA Today, New York Times best-selling authors, you will see reviews that are pretty 50-50. People either hate it or they love it.
Yeah.
So guys, no one is immune to
That's right.
to that.
No one's immune to negative criticism. That's true.
Yeah, no, don't let it get you down.
Don't let it get you down. Absolutely. Well, that same short story that I stuck in a box for 10 years, I saw a submission call from a woman that I know. You know, I don't know her personally, but I knew her writing, and she was a Saskatchewan writer and a Order of Canada writer, Berna Barclay, and she had a call out to that she would give feedback to every submission, and she got like a couple of hundred submissions, so it was a major thing to offer. But I sent this story to her thinking to myself, well, if anyone could tell me how to write this as a story and not a character sketch, it'll be Berna, right? And I sent this in to her for this little magazine that she was doing, literary magazine. And she sent me back a letter a few weeks later saying, I love your short story and I want to publish it. So, and it was pretty much published. I mean, there were a few changes. We did a little editing, but it was pretty much the way I had written it 10 years earlier. So there's the lesson, you know, just believe that your time will come or whatever, you know, and keep working on it. Keep working on your skill and keep working on your, you know, I don't think you have to be tough, but you just have to realize that you're going to get better and believe that, you know. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Believe it will happen, and it will happen, right?
Fantastic advice all the way around. And guys, make sure that you check out Marie's books. They are gorgeous. And I mean, you'll see the covers at the end of the video too. And just, you're on Amazon. And where else?
Everywhere. Yeah, everywhere books are sold. If you're looking for book links, I do have them on my website too, which is mariepowell.ca. Easy to remember. I'm the Canadian, so .ca, right? mariepowell.ca. And I've got a whole page of book links on there, but it's basically available everywhere. Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, you know, Chapters, you name it, and it's there. Yeah.
Guys, definitely go check out the series. And Marie, thank you again so much for taking the time out of your day to sit down and chat with me. I had a fantastic time.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me, Anna. It's been fun.
All right, guys, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on more great things that are coming up. And everybody just stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time. Bye.